Have you ever just looked at a baby and really wondered what is going on in that little head? It's such a fundamental question, right? I mean, it's really about where our own minds come from. So today, let's try to find out. For the longest time, the common wisdom, even among brilliant philosophers and psychologists, was that a baby's mind is just a blank slate, a blooming, buzzing confusion. But what if that's just completely wrong? Well, the first person to really come along and challenge that whole idea was the amazing Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. He suggested something that was, at the time, pretty radical. Babies are not passive blobs. No, they are active experimenters, they're forming theories, they are trying to make sense of reality from the second they are born. So, to figure out how these little scientists think, Piaget didn't just sit back and watch them. He actually gave them problems to solve. And what he discovered was a world that to us seems totally alien and frankly completely illogical.
Okay, let's start with a concept that feels just completely obvious to us as adults: object permanence. When I walk behind a wall, you know I'm still there, right? You don't think I've just vanished from the universe. But for a baby, well, this is a mind-bending discovery.
Piaget made this fascinating claim. He noticed that if you show a baby, say, a rattle, and then just hide it behind a screen, the baby doesn't look for it. To them, it's just gone. This, he argued, is exactly why peekaboo is the most hilarious game in the world to an infant. When you cover your face, you have literally ceased to exist. And you know what? It gets even stranger. With a slightly older baby, maybe around 9 months, you can do this. You hide a toy under cup A. The baby finds it. Great. You do it again. Baby finds it again. Then, right in front of them, so they can see everything, you hide the toy under cup B. And what do? They still reach for cup A. It's like their earlier success created a rule in their mind that completely overrides what they just saw with their own eyes. This brings us to Piaget's most famous experiment, and it's one you can actually try at home. You take 2 identical glasses, same amount of water in each, ask a 5-year-old, are they the same? And they'll say, yep, of course. So far, so good. Now watch carefully. No water's been added, none taken away. All you do is pour the water from one glass into a differently shaped container. We adults know, obviously, the amount of water hasn't changed, but a child's brain, well, it sees something very different. You ask the kid, okay, now which one has more? And almost every single time, they will point right at the tall, skinny glass. Why? For Piaget, this was the key. A child's logic is totally dominated by what they see. Taller just equals more. They haven't yet grasped that abstract idea of conservation. For decades, Piaget's work was the absolute foundation of developmental psychology. His findings were brilliant, you could repeat them again and again. But then a new generation of scientists started to wonder, what if there was a fundamental flaw in his whole approach?
See, Piaget relied on 2 things: asking kids questions and watching what they did with their hands, like reaching for a toy. But what if a baby knows the toy's at location B, but just can't stop their arm from repeating the successful action of reaching for A? What if they can't explain their logic? Maybe the methods themselves were actually hiding what babies truly understand.
And this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. Researchers had to basically become inventors. They had to dream up entirely new ways to probe the infant mind, ways that didn't depend on language or on complex motor skills. So how in the world do you get inside a baby's head without asking questions? Well, you focus on the one thing they can do with incredible skill from the moment they're born: move their eyes. Babies are masters of looking. And what they choose to look at, and for how long, can tell us a surprising amount about what's going on in their minds. The logic is actually pretty simple and really elegant. First, you bore a baby. Seriously, it's called habituation. You show them the same event over and over until they start looking away. Then, you show them something that violates the rules of the world. If they understand those rules, they'll be surprised. And how do you measure surprise in a baby? They look longer. So essentially, modern researchers have become magicians. They put on little magic shows for babies. They show them events that should be possible, and then events that seem impossible, like a solid object passing right through another one. If the baby stares longer at the impossible trick, it proves they actually understood the rule that was just broken. So, when these clever new methods were applied to Piaget's classic questions, the results were stunning. It turns out that babies know far, far more than anyone had ever imagined. Let's go back to object permanence. A researcher named Renée Béliager used this magic trick method. She showed babies a screen rotating like a drawbridge. Then she placed a block behind it, out of sight. The babies were totally fine when the screen stopped where the block should have been. But when the screen appeared to pass right through that hidden block, they stared in disbelief. They knew it was still there. And the discoveries just kept coming. The psychologist Karen Wynn showed 6-month-olds one doll being placed behind a screen, and then another doll joining it. But when the screen dropped to reveal only one doll, the babies looked longer. They were surprised. It was as if they knew deep down that 1 + 1 should equal 2. This suggests a basic understanding of objects, maybe even a little bit of math, is built in from the very start. All of this new data suggests we need a completely different picture of how the mind is organized. Remember, Piaget thought of the mind as one big general-purpose computer that slowly gets more powerful, but the modern view is really quite different. This alternative idea is called the modular view of the mind. The idea here is that the brain isn't one single thing, but it's more like a Swiss Army knife. It's a collection of specialized tools, and each one is designed for a very specific job. So you might have one pre-wired module or tool for understanding how physical objects behave, a totally separate one for understanding people and what they might be thinking, and maybe another one for understanding the difference between a rock and a rabbit. And what's really crucial is that these different tools can all develop at their own different rates. This modular theory gives us a really powerful framework for understanding conditions like autism. It could help explain how an individual can have profound difficulties understanding social cues, that people module, while having perfectly intact or even superior abilities in understanding mechanical or logical systems, that physics module. Now, you might be wondering, why should we care so much about what babies know? Well, the biologist Stephen Jay Gould put it perfectly with this question. You could stare at an adult zebra forever and never know the answer. But if you look at how a zebra develops in the womb, you'll find out which color comes first. Development reveals the underlying structure. And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. Understanding the adult mind, our own mind, is impossible without understanding its origins. By studying that incredible journey from a newborn to a fully formed person, we're not just studying babies, we're studying the very foundation of what it means to be human.